example of that. And so as a result, and he wasn't the only one in the scheme generally, as a result, they had to replace electors. And again, just to keep in mind, all the electors we're talking about here are people who supported Donald Trump. These are people who signed up and said, I want to be an elector for Donald Trump. And these people, when they stepped out, they had to replace them. And part of what's required under the Electoral Count Act is that there are procedures for doing that. And they couldn't follow those procedures because they were replacing people without the consent of the governor and things of that nature. Also in Pennsylvania, I believe it was Pennsylvania, there was a call where, and there's a text of this, where electors were pushing back on this and also wanting to be covered if there was liability and, you know, to be indemnified and things of that nature. And they wanted like statements in their certificates basically saying you're only going to use this if, you know, you win these lawsuits. And there was a text chain with some of the people who were carrying out this scheme for President Trump. Basically, it ended with these people should be shot because, and then we can't let this snowball like this, otherwise we're going to have to do this in all the other states.
Again, your recollection.
I'm sorry. I don't think he said these people should be shot. I think they said whoever put this slate together should be shot. I think that's what it said.
Well, I think it is one of the reasons the Pennsylvania fake electors didn't get prosecuted was because they pushed back and said, we're not going to sign this unless you include language saying that this will only be used if there are court cases say that we are the real electors. In your investigation, did you find that the people who were conspiring with the president to push this plan were telling electors one thing and then using their certificates in another way?
Yes, the electors were told that they would only be used in these circumstances, and as you know, other ways of overturning the election fell away, and as President Trump and his co-conspirators became more desperate, they came up with even more obviously illegal ways to try to stay in power, and it eventually devolved to, let's just say that these are the electors, regardless of whether any court has said so, the governor has said so, the people of the state and most have said so, and they didn't go back to electors and say, hey, we're going to use your, I know we told you we were only going to use this if we won a lawsuit. They just went ahead and used it. And I think, again, even among the fake electors, there would have been witnesses. I'm thinking of one witness in particular in Georgia who I thought would have been very powerful of, I would never have done this if I thought they were going to use my name to overturn the will of the people just because one person said so.
Okay. I mean, there were other efforts in Pennsylvania. We had the very famous Four Seasons Landscape-based press conference, which is famous to this day. But there was also a meeting that Pennsylvania State Senator Doug Mastriano hosted in a hotel in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, around Thanksgiving weekend. So, between the certification in Pennsylvania and the presentation of the electors in D.C. So even though it was framed as a hearing, Giuliani attended that event and ended up speaking to promote some of these falsehoods about election fraud or wasting votes or whatever, and made it sort of a rally. Donald Trump even called into this event and claimed that he had won Pennsylvania by a lot. Are you familiar with that event?
I do recall that. I think that's in our final report.
I believe so, yes. Did you uncover anything in connection with that event with respect to what they were trying to do with Pennsylvania votes?
Well, I think they were calling them hotel hearings, and it's because they couldn't have hearings actually in the legislature, and so I don't think Pennsylvania was the only state where that happened. Now, there's obviously nothing illegal about having a political rally or having a meeting of people of one political party. Our case was about knowingly false fraud claims.
Right, yeah, it did appear to be more just some of the kind of performative stuff that we see here where they try to make something out of nothing. Well, I want to thank you for your testimony, for your work, for your that of your entire staff, who I know worked extremely hard and with great integrity. And wholly support your request to testify before the American people. I would really like to see that. Americans' tax dollars, including my constituents, have funded your investigation, and I think that they should hear from you directly about what you found and not have your testimony hidden from them. So, thank you.
On another state, on November 20th, Mr. Trump called Republican legislators from Michigan to the White House and urged them to remove the Biden electors and replace them with electors that would elect Trump. They, subsequent to that, made a statement that there was no evidence for that and went back, and the electors were certified as the votes had indicated they should be. Subsequent to that, in December, there was an effort to create fake electors. And in fact, on December 14th, when the electoral colleges meet in all the state legislatures, there were 16 fake electors in the basement in Michigan, and 4 of them tried to get into the Capitol to overturn the election. Did you look at that whole phenomena?
We did.
And what was your conclusion? What was the, how would that have played, if at all, in your prosecution?
Well, I think that event you're referring to, and I think we interviewed some of the law enforcement officers who were there that day when they were trying to get in. What they were doing and what the email traffic among co-conspirators showed is they were trying to mimic the procedures that are required by the Electoral Count Act, but they couldn't mimic them. And if I recall, the email traffic on this started with, we have to follow these procedures. And then when it became clear they couldn't follow all the procedures, it was like, well, do the best you can to follow as many as you can. And so I think, if I do recall, certain states, it may have been Michigan, that the electors had to convene in a certain government location. And so as a result, I believe there may have been a state official involved in trying to get them into, if I'm thinking of the right situation, get them in there so again they could mimic the procedures, even though they were not the electors that represented the will of the people, how the vote was actually counted.
Thank you.
I know we're getting close to our hour, we've about 5 minutes left, so I want to end on asking about, and can you just summarize for us the actions that Mr. Trump took with Vice President Pence? What did Donald Trump want Vice President Pence to do to overturn the election results?
Well, ultimately, he wanted him to just hand him the election to say he won. There were different proposals that President Trump and his co-conspirators put to Mike Pence, but in essence, he wanted Mike Pence to impose his own choice about who should be president over the will of the American people who voted in the election.
Was one of those ways that Donald Trump tried to pressure Mr. Pence was to reject the lawful electors' certificates of their votes during the electoral counting process? Was that one of the ways that you recall?
That's correct.
How did Mr. Pence respond back to Mr. Trump's pressure about rejecting the lawful elector certificates?
I think Mike Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, falls into the category that I described before. He did something that was very hard to do. He went against his party. He paid a price for it. But I think, again, someone like that putting country over party, I think he would have been an effective witness. He did not agree to go along with it.
Did you have the opportunity to interview Mr. Pence as part of your investigation?
Can we stop for 1 sec?
We go off the record. Go off the record, yeah. I'll repeat my question. Did you have the opportunity to interview Mr. Pence as part of your investigation?
I think the answer to that question might involve 6E, and so I'm not going to answer that.
Going back to the response that you just talked about with Mr. Pence's response to President Trump's pressure, is this yet another example of evidence that showed Mr. Trump knew or should have known that what he was saying to the American public was false regarding the election of 2020?
Yes. The vice president was one, and this is alleged in our indictment and our filings, was one of several people saying he was not seeing the outcome determinative fraud that Donald Trump was claiming.
And what would have happened if Vice President Pence would have gone along and refused to count the lawful elector certificates?
Well, thankfully, we don't know, but I would say that he and the other people who stood up and said, I'm not going to do that, may have changed the course of history in terms of our country, of having an election where someone took power in our country who didn't actually win the election. So, as I said, I think it took a lot of courage on his part. He's also someone who, as you all know, when the attack on the Capitol happened, he wouldn't leave. People wanted him to leave. And I think, again, that reflects very well on him.
My last question, I know earlier when you were talking to the majority, there was this discussion of First Amendment issues with Mr. Trump talking about these false claims of the election. Do you remember that discussion?
Yes.
And during our hour, we talked a lot about the knowledge that Mr. Trump had, one, that he had lost the 2020 election, and two, that what he was saying to the American public was false about the 2020 election. Can you help now bring us full circle on how you analyze the First Amendment claims with the knowledge of the fraud that Mr. Trump was putting out to the American public in 2020 and 2021?
Sure. From a legal perspective, this is really quite clear. I think all of us want to make sure people's First Amendment rights are not abridged in a way that they shouldn't be. I think I certainly feel that way. I'm sure everybody in this room feels that way. But there is a very clear carve-out for fraud in our case law. Supreme Court, I think there's one case, is the Stevens case, talks about that, and there are others. And so when you're committing a fraud, meaning you're not just saying something that's untrue, you're saying it knowing it's untrue or with reckless disregard for the truth, that's not protected by the First Amendment. People commit crimes all the time using words. And when someone commits a fraud, an investment fraud, or someone commits an affinity fraud where you try to gain someone's trust, get them to trust you as a general matter, and then you rip them off, you defraud them. That's all words, but it's not protected by the First Amendment. And in a lot of ways, this case was an affinity fraud. The president had people who had built up trust in him, including people in his own party, and he preyed on that. Some people wouldn't do it, others would. We're lucky that enough wouldn't, that the election was upheld.
Thank you. With that, we'll go off the record at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time.